James Carville, a name synonymous with fiery political debates and sharp commentary, was sitting comfortably in his chair on a popular morning talk show. The studio lights gleamed off his glasses as he leaned forward, ready to deliver one of his trademark monologues. Known for his no-holds-barred approach, Carville had built a reputation over decades as a Democratic strategist who could dismantle opponents with precision and flair. Today, however, his target wasn't just any politician. It was none other than former President Donald Trump, and more specifically his marriage to Melania Trump. The topic itself was controversial, but that never stopped James Carville. With a confident smirk, he began laying out his argument. "Let's be honest here," he started, his voice rising slightly as if addressing not just the live audience, but the entire nation. This whole perfect couple act between Donald and Melania, it's nothing more than a well-choreographed PR stunt. He paused dramatically, letting his words sink in before continuing. Think about it. What do we really know about their relationship beyond the photo shoots and public appearances? Carville went on to paint a picture of what he described as a transactional partnership. According to him, Melania, a former model turned first lady, was essentially playing the role of the dutiful wife to boost Trump's image as a family.
Man, Donald Trump loves being seen as this larger-than-life figure, right? So what better way to polish that image than by having a beautiful, poised woman standing beside him? Carville's tone grew sharper as he spoke, his southern accent
adding weight to every word. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking this is some grand romance. This is politics, folks, pure and simple. The audience murmured in agreement, nodding along as Carville drove his point home. Some clapped enthusiastically, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Others sat quietly, absorbing the bold accusations. But there was something electric in the air, an unspoken anticipation that perhaps this wouldn't be a one-sided conversation. Little did anyone know, someone else was about to step onto the stage and challenge Carville head-on. As Carville wrapped up his opening remarks, the host gestured toward the wings of the set. "Joining us now is Matt Leavitt," the host announced, introducing the next guest with an air of intrigue. He's a communications expert who worked closely with the Trump administration during its early years. "Matt, welcome to the show." Leavitt walked onto the set with an understated confidence, shaking hands with the host and exchanging polite greetings. Dressed in a crisp suit, he exuded professionalism without coming across as overly formal. As he took his seat opposite Carville, the contrast between the two men was striking. Where Carville radiated energy and aggression, Leavitt appeared calm and composed, almost as if he were preparing for a chess match rather than a heated debate. Sensing the shift in dynamics, the host wasted no time diving back into the discussion. "Matt, I think you heard James's take on Donald and Melania Trump's relationship. What are your thoughts?" Leavitt smiled faintly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. "Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show," he began, his voice steady and measured. "And yes, I did hear James's comments, and while I respect his passion, I have to say I strongly disagree with his assessment." At this, Carville raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair with a look that said, "Oh, this should be good." The audience, too, seemed intrigued, sensing that they were about to witness a clash of perspectives. Leavitt continued, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I understand why people might jump to conclusions based on surface-level observations. After all, Donald Trump is a polarizing figure, and his life has always been under intense scrutiny. But reducing his marriage to Melania to some kind of PR strategy does a disservice to both of them." He paused briefly, locking eyes with Carville. "I've seen firsthand how these two interact, not just in front of cameras but behind closed doors. And trust me when I say there's far more depth to their relationship than meets the eye." Carville shifted slightly in his seat, his expression unreadable. Was he surprised, skeptical, or simply biding his time before launching another verbal salvo? Whatever the case, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone, from the host to the camera crew to the live audience, could feel the stakes rising. Leavitt pressed on, determined to make his case. "Let's start with Melania herself. She's often portrayed as this passive figure, content to stay in the background while Donald takes center stage. But anyone who's spent time around her knows that couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, she prefers to keep a low profile compared to her husband, but that doesn't mean she lacks agency or influence. In fact, she's incredibly deliberate about how she presents herself and what causes she chooses to champion. To illustrate his point, Leavitt shared a story from his time working with the Trump administration. There was one instance during a high-profile event where Melania quietly pulled Donald aside. Now, mind you, this was at a moment when things were getting pretty chaotic. Lots of distractions, lots of pressure. But she didn't hesitate to step in and remind him of something very important, why he ran for office in the first place. According to Leavitt, Melania's intervention wasn't just a gesture of support. It was a reminder of purpose. She told him, "Don't forget why you're doing this. You wanted to fight for the American people, and that's what you need to focus on right now." Recalling the memory, Leavitt shook his head slightly as if still marvel highlights. As Matt Leavitt began to speak, the mood in the studio shifted noticeably. James Carville, who had been leaning back in his chair with an air of confidence, suddenly sat up straighter. It was clear that Leavitt wasn't going to let Carville's accusations slide without a fight. And from the look on Carville's face, he hadn't expected this level of pushback. Leavitt started by addressing Carville's central claim, that Donald and Melania Trump's marriage was nothing more than a calculated public relations move. "Let's break this down," Leavitt said calmly, his voice steady but firm. "If their relationship were truly just about optics, don't you think there would be cracks showing by now? After years of relentless media scrutiny, endless investigations, and constant criticism, not to mention living under the microscope as the first family, don't you think something would have slipped?" He paused for effect, letting the question hang in the air before continuing. "But what we've seen instead is resilience. Not perfection, mind you, because no marriage is perfect, but resilience. And that tells me there's more to their bond than what meets the eye." Carville crossed his arms, clearly listening intently but not ready to concede anything just yet. Sensing the resistance, Leavitt decided to take a different approach. Instead of relying solely on abstract arguments, he chose to share specific examples from his time working with the Trump administration. These weren't just anecdotes. They were moments that revealed layers of humanity often overlooked in the noise of political discourse. "One thing I'll never forget," Leavitt began, "is how Melania handled herself during some of the most challenging days of the presidency. There was this one particular event. It was chaotic, to say the least. Protesters outside, reporters shouting questions, staff running around trying to keep everything together. In situations like that, even the most seasoned politicians can lose their cool. But Melania? She stayed calm, almost unnervingly so." Leavitt went on to describe how Melania navigated the chaos with grace, focusing not on the distractions, but on supporting her husband. She didn't try to steal the spotlight or make grand gestures. Instead, she did something far more impactful. She reminded Donald why he was there in the first place. She pulled him aside at one point and said, "Remember why you're doing this. You wanted to fight for the American people, and that's what you need to focus on right now." The audience leaned forward, captivated by the story. Even Carville seemed momentarily taken aback, though he quickly masked it with a skeptical smirk. Leavitt noticed but didn't let it deter him. He pressed on, emphasizing the significance of the moment. That interaction wasn't staged for cameras or designed to win over voters. It was private, genuine, and deeply personal. To me, that speaks volumes about the kind of connection they share. But Leavitt wasn't done yet. He knew that to counter Carville's accusations effectively, he needed to address not just Donald and Melania's relationship, but also Melania's individual role within it. Melania is often dismissed as someone who simply plays the part of the supportive wife, Leavitt explained, his tone shifting slightly to convey frustration at this perception. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, she prefers to stay out of the limelight compared to her husband, but that doesn't mean she lacks agency or purpose. To drive his point home, Leavitt highlighted Melania's work as First Lady. particularly her Be Best initiative aimed at combating cyberbullying and promoting children's well-being. This wasn't something handed to her by Donald or anyone else, he said. It was her choice, her passion project. And if you look closely at how she approached it, you'll see that it reflects her values and priorities, not necessarily his. Leavitt then shared another behind-the-scenes story that painted Melania in a new light. There was a meeting early on in the administration where advisors were throwing out ideas for initiatives Melania could champion. Some suggested safe topics like arts education or health awareness, things that wouldn't ruffle feathers. But Melania pushed back. She insisted on tackling cyberbullying, even though she knew it would invite controversy. Why? Because she believed it mattered. The audience murmured approvingly, clearly moved by the image of Melania standing her ground despite potential backlash. Carville, however, remained unconvinced, or at least pretended to be. He interjected with a raised hand, signaling that he wanted to respond. "Hold on a second," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You're telling me all these heartwarming stories, but isn't it possible that they're exceptions, rather than the rule? That maybe these moments are cherry-picked to fit a narrative?" Leavitt nodded, acknowledging the validity of the question. "Fair point," he replied, maintaining his composure. "But here's the thing. Every relationship has its ups and downs. No one is claiming that Donald and Melania's marriage is without challenges. What I am saying is that reducing it to a PR strategy ignores the complexity of human emotions and overlooks the very real ways they support each other." He paused again, this time locking eyes with Carville. "And let's not forget," he added pointedly, "that your argument assumes Melania has no autonomy in this relationship, that she's somehow a passive participant, content to play along with whatever script Donald writes for her. Does that really seem fair to her, or accurate?" The tension in the room was palpable. Carville shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual quick wit seemingly stalled. For once, he didn't have a snappy comeback ready. The host, sensing the weight of the moment, stepped in to steer the conversation forward. "James, what do you make of Matt's points?" she asked, turning the spotlight back on Carville. Carville hesitated, rubbing his temples as if trying to process everything Leavitt had just said. When he finally spoke, his response lacked the bravado that had characterized his earlier remarks. "Well, I still think there's merit to questioning the nature of their relationship," he said cautiously. "But I'll admit, Matt raises some interesting counterpoints." The audience erupted into applause, recognizing the rare admission of uncertainty from one of politics' most outspoken figures. Meanwhile, Leavitt allowed himself a small smile, knowing he had made his case effectively. This wasn't just about defending Donald and Melania Trump. It was about challenging simplistic narratives and encouraging people to look beyond surface-level assumptions. As the segment drew to a close, the energy in the studio felt charged, yet reflective. Both guests had delivered compelling arguments, leaving viewers with plenty to think about. Whether they agreed with Carville's initial accusations or sided with Leavitt's rebuttal, one thing was certain: the discussion had sparked a meaningful dialogue about the complexities of relationships, power dynamics, and the importance of nuance in understanding public figures. Little did anyone know, the ripple effects of this exchange would extend far beyond the confines of the talk show. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, clips of the debate went viral, and conversations about Melania Trump's role as First Lady gained renewed attention. For Matt Leavitt, this was just the beginning of a larger platform to share insights about the Trump era, a role he embraced with humility and determination. And for James Carville, it served as a reminder that even the sharpest minds can be caught off guard when faced with unexpected truths. As the conversation deepened, Matt Leavitt decided to take things a step further. He could see that James Carville was beginning to waver, not entirely convinced, but certainly less certain than he had been at the start of the segment. Sensing this opening, Leavitt leaned forward slightly in his chair, signaling to both Carville and the audience that he was about to share something significant. "You know," Leavitt began, his tone thoughtful yet deliberate. "There's one story I've never shared publicly before today, It's something that happened behind the scenes during my time working with the Trump administration, and while it might not answer every question people have about Donald and Melania's relationship, I think it sheds light on the kind of bond they truly share. The studio fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Leavitt. Even Carville, who had been scribbling notes on a pad moments earlier, stopped writing and looked up, curiosity evident on his face. The host nodded encouragingly, urging Leavitt to continue. It was late one evening after a particularly grueling day at the White House, Leavitt recalled, his voice softening as if reliving the moment. The president had just finished, back-to-back meetings, some contentious, others exhausting, and you could tell he was drained. As staff members cleared out of the room, I noticed Melania walk in quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She didn't say much at first. She simply handed 1 cup to Donald and sat down beside him. Leavitt paused for effect, allowing the image to sink in. Now, here's the thing. This wasn't some staged photo op or a carefully planned gesture. For the cameras, there weren't any reporters around, no aides documenting the moment. It was just the 2 of them alone in that room. And what struck me most wasn't the act itself, but the way they interacted afterward. He went on to describe how Melania gently encouraged Donald to open up about the challenges he'd faced that day. She didn't offer solutions or try to fix anything, Leavitt explained. Instead, she listened. Really listened. You could see the tension melting away from him as he talked, almost like he needed that release valve. And when he finally smiled, a genuine smile, not the kind you see in press conferences, you could feel the warmth between them. The audience seemed spellbound, hanging on Leavitt's every word. Carville, too, appeared transfixed, though. He tried to mask it by adjusting his glasses and glancing at his notes, but there was no denying the impact of Leavitt's storytelling. This wasn't just another anecdote. It was a window into a side of the Trumps' relationship that few outsiders ever got to see. Leavitt pressed on, knowing he had momentum on his side. What I'm trying to say is this. Relationships aren't black and white. They're messy, complicated, and deeply personal. To reduce Donald and Melania's marriage to a PR strategy is to ignore all the nuances that make human connections meaningful. Sure, they're both strong-willed individuals with very different personalities, but isn't that true of many successful couples? Carville shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly grappling with Leavitt's argument. For someone who prided himself on being quick on his feet, he seemed unusually hesitant to respond. Perhaps it was because Leavitt's points were hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. Or maybe it was the realization that his initial accusations, while provocative, lacked the depth required to fully capture the complexity of the situation. Seizing the opportunity, Leavitt turned his focus to Melania herself, emphasizing her independence and agency within the marriage. "Let's talk about Melania for a moment," he said, his tone shifting to one of admiration. Yes, she's married to one of the most polarizing figures in modern history. Yes, she's had to navigate unimaginable scrutiny and criticism. But through it all, she's remained steadfastly true to herself and to her values. To illustrate his point, Leavitt recounted an incident involving Melania's Be Best initiative, which aimed to address issues like cyberbullying and children's well-being. When Melania announced her platform, critics were quick to dismiss it as superficial or irrelevant. Some even accused her of using it as a shield to deflect attention from her husband's controversies. But anyone who worked closely with her knows that couldn't be further from the truth. He described how Melania poured countless hours into researching and developing the initiative, often pushing back against advisors who suggested safer, more conventional topics. There was a meeting where someone proposed focusing on childhood, nutrition instead of cyberbullying, Leavitt revealed. It would have been an easier sell, sure, less controversial, less risky, but Melania refused to compromise. She believed so strongly in the importance of addressing online harassment that she was willing to face criticism head-on. The audience erupted into applause, clearly moved by the portrayal of Melania as a determined and principled woman. Even Carville found himself nodding reluctantly, unable to deny the authenticity of Leavitt's account. Still, he wasn't ready to concede defeat entirely. Clearing his throat, he interjected, Okay, fine. Let's say there's more to their relationship than meets the eye. That still doesn't mean it's not partly driven by political considerations. After all, perception matters in politics, doesn't it? Leavitt smiled faintly, appreciating the counterpoint. Absolutely, he agreed. Perception does matter. But let's not confuse perception with reality. Just because a relationship benefits someone politically doesn't automatically mean it's fake or insincere. People can care deeply for each other and recognize the advantages of presenting a united front. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. The exchange between the two men grew increasingly animated, with Leavitt continuing to challenge Carville's assumptions at every turn. At one point, he posed a rhetorical question that left Carville momentarily speechless. "Isn't it possible," Leavitt asked, leaning forward with quiet intensity, "that your disdain for Donald Trump has clouded your judgment? That maybe you've allowed your biases to shape your interpretation of his personal life?" The audience gasped audibly, sensing the weight of Leavitt's accusation. Carville blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the directness of the remark. For once, the legendary pundit seemed unsure of how to respond. Instead of launching into a fiery rebuttal, he hesitated, rubbing his temples as if trying to process the implications of Leavitt's words. Sensing the shift in dynamics, the host stepped in to guide the conversation forward. "James, do you want to respond to that?" she asked, her tone neutral but probing. Carville exhaled slowly, composing himself before speaking. "Look," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I'll admit that I don't have all the answers. Relationships are complicated, and I'm not claiming to understand every detail of theirs. But I stand by my belief that appearances can be deceiving, especially in politics." Leavitt nodded respectfully, acknowledging Carville's candor. "Fair enough," he replied. "All I'm asking is that we approach these discussions with an open mind, and without jumping to conclusions based solely on preconceived notions." The time the segment drew to a close, the atmosphere in the studio felt charged yet reflective. Both guests had delivered compelling arguments, leaving viewers with plenty to ponder. Social media platforms lit up with reactions as clips of the debate spread like wildfire across the internet. Supporters of both sides weighed in, debating whether Carville's initial accusations held water or if Leavitt's defense had succeeded in changing minds. For Leavitt, the experience marked a turning point in his career. Overnight, he became a sought-after voice for balanced discussions about the Trump era, praised for his ability to present nuanced perspectives without resorting to partisan rhetoric. Meanwhile, Carville found himself reflecting on the encounter, privately admitting to colleagues that Leavitt had raised valid points that forced him to reconsider some of his assumptions. Whether audiences ultimately sided with Carville or Leavitt, one thing was clear. The debate had sparked a broader conversation about the complexities of public figures' private lives and the dangers of oversimplifying relationships for the sake of political narratives. The debate between James Carville and Matt Leavitt had reached a tipping point. The tension in the studio was palpable, with both men locked in a battle of wits that showed no signs of slowing down. While Leavitt's calm demeanor and well-reasoned arguments had clearly unsettled Carville, the seasoned political strategist wasn't about to concede without a fight. As the host turned to him for a response, Carville took a deep breath, visibly collecting his thoughts before diving back into the fray. "Well," Carville began, his voice steady but tinged with frustration, "let me make one thing crystal clear. I'm not denying that Donald and Melania might have moments of genuine connection. Of course they do. Every couple does, even those in arranged marriages or purely transactional relationships." He emphasized the word transactional as if to remind everyone of his original accusation. But let's not kid ourselves here. We're talking about two people who live under an extraordinary amount of public scrutiny. Their every move is analyzed, dissected, and spun for political gain. So forgive me if I'm skeptical about how much of their relationship is real versus manufactured. Carville leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he focused on Leavitt. "Look, Matt, you've shared some compelling stories, don't get me wrong. But aren't those moments exactly what we'd expect to see from a couple trying to project stability? Isn't it possible that these private interactions you described are part of a larger strategy to maintain a certain image?" Leavitt listened, intently, nodding occasionally to show he understood Carville's perspective. When it was his turn to speak, however, he wasted no time dismantling the argument piece by piece. "James, I appreciate where you're coming from," he said, his tone measured but firm. "It's true that public figures like Donald and Melania are constantly aware of how they're perceived. But there's a difference between being mindful of appearances and fabricating emotions entirely." He paused, letting the distinction sink in before continuing. "Think about it this way. Just because someone cares about how they're viewed doesn't mean their feelings are fake. People want to be liked. They want to be respected. That's human nature. And yes, politicians and their spouses are no exception. But to suggest that their entire relationship is built on deception ignores the reality of who they are as individuals." Leavitt then pivoted to address another aspect of Carville's argument: the idea that Melania's role as First Lady was merely a performance designed to bolster her husband's image. "You mentioned earlier that Melania plays the part of the supportive wife," Leavitt said, glancing briefly at Carville before addressing the audience. "And sure, she does support Donald in many ways, but reducing her to a prop undermines everything she's accomplished on her own terms." To illustrate his point, Leavitt highlighted Melania's efforts during her time as First Lady, particularly her work on the Be Best initiative. "This wasn't something handed to her by Donald or anyone else," he explained. "She chose this cause because it mattered deeply to her, as a mother, as a former model dealing with media criticism, and as someone who understands the impact of online harassment firsthand. Her passion for this issue wasn't manufactured. It came from a place of personal conviction." Leavitt went on to describe how Melania navigated challenges within the administration, often pushing back against advisors who urged her to take safer, less controversial paths. There was pushback when she decided to focus on cyberbullying, he revealed. Some thought it would open her up to too much criticism, given the irony of tackling such a topic while married to someone known for his combative rhetoric. But Melania didn't back down. She believed in the importance of the message and was willing to face the consequences. The audience erupted into applause once again, clearly moved by Leavitt's portrayal of Melania as a determined and independent woman. Even Carville seemed momentarily taken aback, though he quickly masked his reaction by scribbling notes furiously on his pad. Sensing an opportunity to press his advantage, Leavitt delivered what would become one of the most memorable lines of the debate. "Here's the bottom line," he said, leaning forward with quiet intensity. "If Melania were truly nothing more than a pawn in Donald Trump's game, don't you think we'd have seen cracks by now? After years of relentless attacks from the media, endless investigations, and constant pressure from all sides, yet through it all, she's remained steadfast, not just in supporting her husband, but in staying true to herself. That's not the behavior of someone playing a role. That's the behavior of someone living authentically, even under extraordinary circumstances." Carville shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly struggling to formulate a rebuttal. For someone who thrived on quick comebacks and razor-sharp wit, this uncharacteristic hesitation spoke volumes. Finally, after several seconds of silence, he spoke, but his response lacked the confidence that had defined his earlier remarks. "Hear you, Matt," Carville said, his voice quieter now, almost reflective. "And I'll admit, you've raised some valid points that challenge my initial assumptions, but let's be honest. Perception is reality in politics. Whether their relationship is genuine or not, the fact remains that it serves a purpose. One, that benefits them both politically." Leavitt nodded, acknowledging the kernel of truth in Carville's statement. "You're absolutely right," he replied. "Perception matters, especially in the world of politics. But let's not confuse perception with fabrication. Just because a relationship has political implications doesn't automatically mean it's insincere. People can care deeply for each other and recognize the advantages of presenting a united front. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." The exchange grew increasingly animated as both men continued to spar, each refusing to cede ground entirely. Carville tried to pivot back to his original argument, suggesting that even if there were elements of truth in Leavitt's stories, The overarching narrative of Trump using his wife for image control still held weight. But Leavitt was ready for him, countering with yet another example from his time working with the Trumps. "There's one more thing I want to share," Leavitt said, his tone softening slightly as he recounted a final anecdote. During a particularly difficult period in the White House, Melania made a decision that surprised a lot of people, including some of her closest advisors. Instead of retreating from the spotlight or distancing herself from the controversy, she doubled down on her commitment to her family. She spent more time with Barron, ensuring he felt grounded despite the chaos surrounding them. And she stood by Donald, offering quiet but unwavering support when he needed it most. Leavitt paused, locking eyes with Carville as he delivered his closing remark. "That kind of dedication isn't something you fake. It's not something you manufacture for the cameras. It's real, raw, and deeply personal. And if we're going to have honest conversations about public figures' private lives, we need to acknowledge that complexity instead of reducing it to simplistic narratives." The audience erupted into applause once again, clearly moved by Leavitt's impassioned defense. Even Carville seemed momentarily speechless, his usual bravado replaced by a rare moment of introspection. As the segment drew to a close, the host thanked both guests for their contributions, noting that the discussion had sparked important questions about the intersection of politics, perception, and personal relationships. Backstage, rumors swirled that Carville had briefly considered walking off the set mid-interview, a claim he later denied but couldn't fully refute. Meanwhile, Leavitt gained newfound recognition for his eloquent rebuttal, earning praise from viewers across the political spectrum. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, as clips of the debate spread like wildfire, sparking heated discussions about the Trump's marriage and the broader implications of scrutinizing public figures' private lives. For Carville, the experience served as a humbling reminder that even the sharpest minds can find themselves challenged when confronted with unexpected truths. And for Leavitt, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which he emerged as a trusted voice for balanced, nuanced discussions about the complexities of modern politics and the human stories behind the headlines. As the debate between James Carville and Matt Leavitt wrapped up, the studio audience was buzzing with energy. The exchange had been intense, thought-provoking, and at times downright electric. Both men had delivered compelling arguments, leaving viewers with plenty to chew on long after the cameras stopped rolling. But as the host thanked them for their contributions, it became clear that this wasn't just another political showdown. It was a moment that would resonate far beyond the confines of the talk show. Within minutes of the segment airing, social media platforms exploded with reactions. Clips of the heated exchange went viral almost instantly, sparking debates across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Hashtags like Carville speechless, Leavitt wins, and Trump marriage debate began trending worldwide. Supporters of both sides weighed in passionately, dissecting every argument, counter-argument, and subtle nuance of the discussion. On one side were those who praised Matt Leavitt for his calm yet powerful defense of Donald and Melania Trump's relationship. Many took to social media to applaud him for challenging simplistic narratives and highlighting the humanity behind the headlines. Leavitt completely dismantled Carville's accusations, one user tweeted. "He reminded us that relationships are complicated and shouldn't be reduced to political talking points." Another fan wrote, "Finally, someone stood up for Melania. She's always been portrayed as some passive figure, but Leavitt showed her strength and independence." For many supporters of the Trumps, Leavitt's anecdotes about private moments between Donald and Melania struck a chord. Stories like Melania pulling Donald aside during chaotic events or quietly supporting him through tough days resonated deeply. One commenter shared, "It's so refreshing to hear someone acknowledge Melania's agency instead of treating her like a pawn. She's her own person," and Leavitt nailed that point perfectly. On the other side of the spectrum, James Carville still had his fair share of defenders. Critics argued that while Leavitt made valid points, they didn't necessarily disprove Carville's overarching claim that perception plays a significant role in politics, and by extension, in public figures' personal lives. Carville might have been caught off guard, but he wasn't wrong, one viewer commented on YouTube. Even if there's truth to what Leavitt said, you can't ignore the fact that image matters more than ever in today's world. Some skeptics pointed out that Leavitt's stories, while moving, could easily fit into a narrative designed to polish the Trump's image. Sure, these behind-the-scenes moments sound nice, one Reddit user posted. But how do we know? They're not cherry-picked to make us feel warm and fuzzy. We weren't there, we don't know the full context. Others questioned whether Leavitt's insider perspective gave him too much bias, suggesting that his close ties to the Trump administration might cloud his objectivity. Despite the divided reactions, one thing was undeniable. The debate had struck a nerve nationwide. Viewers couldn't stop talking about it, sharing memes, GIFs, and even parody videos inspired by the clash. A particularly popular meme featured James Carville looking visibly flustered with the caption, "When your opponent is better prepared than you thought." Meanwhile, Matt Leavitt became an overnight sensation, with fans dubbing him the man who silenced Carville and flooding his social media profiles with messages of support. Backstage after the taping, the atmosphere was equally charged. Sources close to the production revealed that Carville had initially considered walking off the set midway through the interview, a claim he later denied but couldn't fully refute. According to insiders, Carville admitted to feeling blindsided by Leavitt's preparation and poise. "I've faced tough opponents before," he reportedly told colleagues afterward, "but Matt came ready to rumble. He knew exactly where to hit me and I didn't see it coming." Meanwhile, Leavitt remained composed and gracious, shaking hands with Carville before heading to his dressing room. When asked about the encounter in a brief post-show interview, he kept his response diplomatic. "James is a brilliant strategist and a formidable debater," Leavitt said with a smile. "I respect his passion and his ability to challenge conventional thinking. If anything, this conversation reinforced the importance of engaging in open, honest dialogue, even when we disagree." The ripple effects of the debate extended well beyond social media. In the days that followed, invitations poured in for Leavitt to appear on other talk shows, podcasts, and news programs. His eloquent defense of the Trump's marriage earned him a reputation as a go-to voice for balanced discussions about the complexities of modern politics. Bookers scrambled to secure him for speaking engagements, eager to capitalize on the buzz surrounding his newfound fame. For Carville, the aftermath was more reflective. Known for his larger-than-life personality and unapologetic opinions, he found himself unusually introspective in the wake of the encounter. On his podcast, he acknowledged that Leavitt had raised valid points that forced him to reconsider some of his assumptions. "Look, I'm not saying I was wrong," Carville clarified, his trademark wit intact. "But Matt made me think twice about oversimplifying things. Relationships are messy, and maybe I let my biases get the better of me this time." Carville's admission surprised many listeners, given his usual reluctance to back down from a fight. Some interpreted it as a sign of growth, praising him for owning up to moments of uncertainty. Others saw it as further evidence of Leavitt's impact, noting that even the sharpest minds can learn something new when confronted with unexpected truths. Behind the scenes, Melania Trump herself reportedly expressed gratitude for Leavitt's portrayal of her character. According to sources close to the former First Lady, she appreciated how Leavitt emphasized her independence and agency, rather than reducing her to a mere accessory in her husband's political career. Melania has always wanted to be seen as more than just a figurehead, one insider revealed. She respects Matt for standing up for her in such a thoughtful way. As the dust settled, the debate left a lasting impression on audiences and participants alike. For Leavitt, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which he emerged as a trusted voice for nuanced discussions about public figures' private lives. For Carville, it served as a humbling reminder that even the most seasoned debaters can find themselves challenged when least expecting it. Ultimately, the conversation sparked a broader cultural shift in how people think about relationships under the microscope of fame and politics. It encouraged viewers to question simplistic narratives and consider the complexities of human emotions, motivations, and connections. Whether they sided with Carville or Leavitt, everyone walked away with a deeper appreciation for the gray areas. that exist in even the most polarizing topics. And perhaps that was the greatest takeaway of all. In a world increasingly defined by black and white thinking, sometimes the most meaningful insights come from embracing the shades of gray. In the days following the explosive debate, the ripple effects continued to spread far and wide. The conversation between James Carville and Matt Leavitt had touched a nerve, not just about Donald and Melania Trump's marriage, but about how society views public figures' personal lives in general. It sparked a national dialogue that transcended politics, forcing people to confront their own biases and assumptions. For many, it was a reminder of the importance of nuance in understanding complex relationships. Whether they're playing out in the White House or on Main Street, Matt Leavitt found himself at the center of this whirlwind. Overnight, he became a household name, with invitations flooding in from across the media landscape. Talk shows clamored to book him for follow-up interviews, hoping to capitalize on his newfound fame. Podcast hosts reached out, eager to hear more of his insights into the Trump administration and beyond. Even universities extended offers for speaking engagements, asking him to share his expertise on communication strategies and navigating high-pressure environments. Leavitt handled the attention with grace, maintaining the same calm demeanor that had impressed audiences during the debate. In every appearance, he emphasized the need for balanced perspectives when discussing public figures. "We live in an era where everything is scrutinized under a microscope," he said during one interview. "But reducing someone's life to headlines or sound bites does them, and us, a disservice. There's always more to the story than what we see on the surface." His words resonated deeply, especially among those who felt fatigued by the constant barrage of polarizing narratives in the news cycle. Viewers appreciated his ability to present nuanced arguments without resorting to partisan rhetoric. One fan tweeted, "Matt Leavitt reminds us that it's okay to ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. We need more voices like his in today's world." Meanwhile, James Carville took a different path in processing the aftermath of the debate. Known for his fiery personality and quick wit, Carville initially struggled to reconcile the fact that he'd been caught off guard. But rather than retreat into silence, he leaned into the experience as an opportunity for reflection. On his podcast, he revisited the topic multiple times, acknowledging both the strengths and weaknesses of his original argument. "I'll admit it, I underestimated Matt," Carville confessed during one episode. "He came prepared, and I didn't give him enough credit for that. But here's the thing, debates aren't about winning or losing, they're about challenging each other to think differently. And if Matt made me question some of my assumptions, then mission accomplished." Carville's willingness to acknowledge his missteps earned him praise from unexpected quarters. Critics who had long dismissed him as overly combative now saw a side of humility they hadn't anticipated. Some even suggested that the encounter might have been a turning point for him, signaling a shift toward greater introspection in his commentary. James Carville, admitting he got something wrong? "That's worth tuning in for," joked one listener in response to the podcast episode. The debate also reignited interest in Melania Trump herself. Long overshadowed by her husband's larger-than-life persona, she suddenly found herself at the forefront of discussions about independence, resilience, and agency. Supporters rallied around her, sharing stories of admiration for her quiet strength and determination. Fans highlighted her work on the Be Best initiative, praising her focus on issues like cyberbullying and children's well-being. Others pointed to her decision to carve out her own identity within the constraints of being First Lady, noting that she had often chosen substance over spectacle. Even critics of the Trump administration couldn't help but grudgingly respect Melania's poise. Under pressure, articles began appearing in major outlets exploring her role as a trailblazer in modern political history, a woman who defied traditional expectations while navigating unprecedented levels of scrutiny. While opinions remained divided, there was a growing consensus that she deserved recognition for her contributions, regardless of political affiliation. For Melania, the renewed attention seemed bittersweet. Sources close to her reported that she appreciated the acknowledgement of her efforts, but remained wary of the media spotlight. "She's always preferred to stay behind the scenes," one insider revealed. But she understands the value of using her platform to make a difference. If this moment helps shine a light on causes she cares about, she'll take it as a win. As weeks turned into months, the legacy of the debate continued to unfold. Clips of the exchange remained popular online, often resurfacing during discussions about public figures' private lives. Educators began incorporating the segment into lessons on critical thinking, encouraging students to analyze the arguments presented by both sides. Journalists cited it as an example of how thoughtful discourse can challenge entrenched narratives and foster deeper understanding. Perhaps most significantly, the debate inspired everyday conversations about the complexities of human relationships. Friends debated over coffee, families discussed it around dinner tables, and strangers exchanged thoughts in comment sections online. Whether they agreed with Carville's skepticism or Leavitt's defense, people walked away with a renewed appreciation for the gray areas that exist in even the most polarizing topics. Looking back, both men reflected on the encounter with a mix of pride and humility. For Leavitt, it solidified his role as a trusted voice for balanced discussions. He embraced the opportunity to engage with diverse audiences, knowing that his words could shape perceptions in meaningful ways. For Carville, it served as a humbling yet enlightening reminder of the power of dialogue. Though he still held firm to many of his beliefs, he admitted that the experience had broadened his perspective and made him a better debater in the process. Ultimately, the debate between James Carville and Matt Leavitt wasn't just about Donald and Melania Trump's marriage. It was about so much more: the intersection of perception and reality, the dangers of oversimplification, and the enduring complexity of human connections. By challenging each other, and by extension, the audience, they reminded everyone of the value of questioning assumptions and seeking truth in a world often dominated by noise. And in doing so, they proved that sometimes the most impactful conversations are the ones that leave us speechless, even if only for a moment.